All right. All right, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to the March 2022 session of the Erie County Workforce Collaborative Training Series. The Erie County Department of Mental Health is happy to be able to offer these trainings to our dedicated providers in the community to support workforce retention and provide an opportunity for individuals from our provider community to share their expertise. Today, we are excited to have Jeffrey Wierzbicki from the Western Problem Gambling Resource Center to talk with us about Problem Gambling 101, just the basics. Coming up in April, we are happy to announce that the topic will be harm reduction, philosophy and practice with Emma Fabian and Naomi Taylor from Evergreen Health. I will put the link for the registration for the April session in the chat at the end of our session here today. I will also be sending out the announcement later today, or you can go on to the erie.gov/mental health website for announcements and registration information. For May, the presentation will be about LGBTQ, and we'll have more information about that next month. All of our sessions are on the fourth Tuesday of the month from noon until 1 p.m., and we'd encourage you to mark your calendars and watch for notices for future events. All of the presentations and recordings for the past offerings are posted on our website, so we'd encourage you to check those out as well. At the end of this session, we will be asking you to complete a very brief evaluation. We hope you will take a moment to fill this out for us so we can continue to improve. This is a community collaborative, and we're always looking for volunteers to share their expertise with our community of providers. If you are interested in doing a 1-hour presentation or are interested in a particular topic, please indicate that on the evaluation, or you can actually email Amy Rockwood at amy.rockwood@erie.gov. This training is being recorded. Everyone will be muted, so if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. Amy Rockwood from the Erie County Department of Mental Health will be monitoring the chat today for us during this session. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Wierzbicki from the Western Problem Gambling Resource Center for his presentation on Problem Gambling 101, just the basics. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. It's all yours.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to share some information with everyone today. Again, I am Jeffrey Wierzbicki. I'm the Western Problem Gambling Resource Center team leader. And I do want to mention that if you need social work CEUs, CASAC credit, or ACES credit, you will receive a second survey request, link. And if you do need the social work CEO, just make sure that you have your license number with you when you fill out that survey, because you'll enter it right into the survey, and whatever email address you would like it sent to, you'll put that in there as well. And it's important to make sure when you put your name in, it's exactly how you would want it to appear so it matches your license. That'll be sent out within the next couple of days, and you'll have, within a week, I'll start sending the certificates out. So about 10 days from now is when certificates will start being sent out. So let's just jump right into gambling, Problem Gambling 101. And today we're going to talk about gambling, substance use disorder, suicide, and other topics that could be a little bit triggering. So if at any time there is something that's a sensitive topic for you, feel free to step away from your computer and come back and join us after a couple of minutes. We're going to keep it light. We're going to keep it conversational. We're going to ask for some participation in the chat. So hopefully you're ready to do a little bit of typing and participate. Makes it a lot more fun and easier for me as we go along. So I work for the New York Council on Problem Gambling. That's our parent organization. We're independent, not-for-profit corporation dedicated to two things, really. Increasing public awareness about problem gambling, and that's something that we're doing right now, and advocating for support and services and treatment for persons that are adversely affected by gambling. We'll talk a little bit more about what we do and how we help people at the end of the presentation. And it is important that we mention at the beginning, the council maintains a neutral stance on gambling. So we're not the gambling police, or we don't work for the Gaming Commission. We're under contract with OASIS. So thank you, OASIS, for funding our programs. And as I mentioned, the Western Problem Gambling Resource Center, we have 7 resource centers across the state. They're broken up into the regions, just like OASIS has broken up their regions. So we have 8 counties in Western New York, and there's 2 of us. So it's a lot of people to cover, and we really appreciate you joining us today. We'll have all our contact information up at the end as well. So if you missed something at the beginning, don't worry about it. We'll have everything up at the end. So first thing we're going to do is wipe our gambling slate clean. We want to just kind of go into this with an open mind. A lot of things we talk about you may be familiar with, you may know, but we want to look at gambling and problem gambling differently. Because even though there's a lot of talk about gambling right now with mobile sports betting going live, which we're going to talk about, there's still a stigma attached to gambling. And I know I had my preconceived notions of what a problem gambler would look like. And there's, the smoky back room with cigars. But we're just going to wipe that clean because as we're learning and as we know, that's not really what it is. And there isn't a face to gambling and problem gambling. What do you want to learn? What are we going to learn? I'm going to give you a quick overview of the topics that we're going to cover. So along the way, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat because it will be monitored. We're going to cover what is gambling. We're going to talk about what problem gambling is. We're going to talk about the spectrum of gambling behaviors. We're going to talk about warning signs, populations that are impacted. We're even going to talk about gambling in the workplace, which is really big right now because March Madness is going on. And I bet there's people listening right now who filled out a bracket who normally wouldn't participate in gambling activities. And of course, we're going to define what gambling is. And that's where we're going to start. We've mentioned the word gambling now at least 50 times. So it's important to define what gambling is and take a look at when I'm referring to gambling, what am I referring to? So if you are able to right now, in the chat box, we use 4 words to define gambling. So if you could throw in a couple of ideas into the chat box, 4 words that we use to define gambling, not gambling activities, but what is gambling? We see a bunch coming in. Amy, hopefully you can keep up.
Yes. Taking risks.
Taking risks.
Compulsion.
Compulsion.
Bets on events.
Betting on events.
Fun.
Fun.
Risk versus reward.
Reward.
Another risk. Betting. Taking a risk. Betting.
Okay. So
making decisions on chance.
So thank you so much, everybody who's throwing the answers in there. And from what I can see from the chat box, because it was going really fast, and it's awesome that everyone is participating. I love to see that. We had risk, and you're risking something of value. Usually we think of money, chance, and reward. And those are the 4 words that we use to define what gambling is. Risk also, it conveys that something bad can happen. By definition, there's a sense of uncertainty and that potential for hazard or danger. There's just no guarantees when it comes to gambling. Value. Of course, the first thing you think of is money. People are betting money. People are betting, the poker chips on the table, and that represents money. But people have gone as extreme as gambling away their homes, their cars, jewelry. Even their personal selves have been put on the line. And it's really anything of value to another person can be wagered on something and bet on. Chance. Gambling's not a sure thing. We had that in the chat box. Gambling, there's a chance for a big reward, of course, but there's a much greater chance that you're going to lose. One of our longer trainings, we do go into the odds of different forms of gambling. But one example is that you have a better chance of spontaneously catching fire in your pajamas tonight than you do winning the lottery. And those are the odds that people are putting sometimes hundreds of dollars down on. Reward. Why do people take these risks? Why are they wagering something that's uncertain? Why are they spending money or their home? It's because there's that potential for a reward. And we'll touch a little bit on the brain activity and what's happening when we talk about problem gambling. We go into that a little bit more in a more clinical training. But that reward is doubling your money, tripling your money, winning a new car. So that's gambling, risking something of value on a game of chance for a desired reward. So hopefully you kind of had an idea of what that gambling definition was. Judging by the chat, it seems like a lot of people kind of had that idea of what gambling was, and this is our definition. So now in the chat, you could put yes or a no. This is our virtual raising of our hands. And have you or anybody, have you gambled in the past year? Yes, 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 no. So we have, this will be a hard one for us to add up. So I'm not going to make you add them all together, Amy, but we're going to come back to this idea of have you ever gambled before or in the last year in a little bit. So thank you all again for participating. Types of gambling. Now we're going to get a little more into when we've already defined it. We know what gambling is. You're risking something of value on a game of chance for a desired reward. What are some of the types of gambling activities? So if you want to throw some ideas into the chat, I don't want to give them away. So what are different gambling activities? Some are obvious. We have lotto, scratch-offs, slots.
March Madness, horse racing, football
Football
squares.
squares. Dice.
Dog racing.
Dog racing.
Bingo.
Bingo.
Meat raffles. Sorry, that's mine.
Meat raffles is a great one because actually it's great that someone recognized that raffles are gambling, because a lot of times that is a form of gambling that isn't always recognized, because where do you see a lot of raffles happening? For charity, in churches. So sometimes the gambling portion of it is kind of, I don't want to say ignored, but just not looked at as the same. Bingo is absolutely a form of gambling. Bingo, you got it. Auctions, roll up the rim. If people are buying their coffee and they could win something, and absolutely. So here's some of the types of gambling, some of the bigger ones. And as we saw, we saw dog racing in there and meat raffles. So you have the video lottery, you have dice and card games, internet gambling, pull-offs or pull tabs, and scratch-off tickets. In New York State, the number one, in our region, in Western New York, the number one problem people are having with gambling is scratch-off tickets, which might be a surprise to some people, but if you're ever in certain stores and you see how much money people are spending on tickets. You have sports wagering. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We have video poker in the chat box, carnival games, games of skill, and you see skill in parentheses because even some of the games of skill are called games of skill, but there's still just such a chance that something bad can happen or you might not win. Bingo, office pools, raffles. We had I think somebody mentioned the football squares and the brackets. And lottery games, which includes any kind of lottery in New York State. So thank you. That was awesome. We touched on just about all of them that we're going to cover and talk about while we go through the rest of the presentation. So there's some emerging kind of options that are coming out with gambling right now. And one of the big things over the past 6-7 years, but especially with COVID, has been gaming. That's on the left. For some reason, the right popped up first. So gaming has become, it was really big. And my son, he was playing Fortnite and Call of Duty and all those games before COVID. But once COVID came about, everyone was at home more, gaming took off. Everybody was in front of their computers more. In-game gambling is taking place in some of these video games. There's casinos within video games. Grand Theft Auto 5 has a casino where you can go in there and gamble. Now, Grand Theft Auto 5, you're supposed to be, I think, 16 or over, 18, or whatever it is. But these games are not, there's no protections for people downloading them, playing them. And loot boxes, and I'll explain what loot boxes are because not everybody knows what a loot box is, but also, even if you knew what it was, you may not have associated it as gambling, but in the United Kingdom, they've actually been classified as gambling, and we're just hoping that it follows suit here. In video games, you can buy say it's a treasure chest. In Fortnite, it's a like a llama, like a big llama thing, and you buy these with real money. So you use real money. You use real money. You buy the loot box. But first, you take your real money and you convert it to their fake money. So you would convert US dollars to V-Bucks. And then within the game, you spend those V-Bucks. And you buy a loot box. You open it up, and you're hoping that the reward inside is something special. And it might not be. It might be a special weapon or a special outfit. It could be a map, whatever it is in that box. But you don't know what's in there. And if you don't get what you wanted, you can just buy another one and hope for what's inside of there. So you're risking something of value on chance for that reward. And it absolutely is gambling within those video games. A lot of times parents also don't know that these types of things are going on. I had to ask a lot of questions to figure out what V-Bucks were being used for. And now I know, and I can keep a better eye on that. Gaming has blurred the line between playing for fun and risking something of value. Casino games are starting to replicate the look and feel of the video game experience. There's slot machines that look like the first-person shooter games like Call of Duty and so the games that are like that. So my son is 13 years old. When he's old enough to go into a casino and he's been playing these video games and he's excelled at them, he walks in and he thinks, no problem, I got this. And then real money goes in. Esports has become a huge industry. There are colleges with esports teams. Colleges give out scholarships. There are arena events, and people bet on them, and people gamble on these games, these esport games. Online opportunities. So the online gambling industry has also excelled over the last couple of years because more people have more time on their hands. It is a way to distract themselves. It's a way to kind of escape from that real world problems that are going on. And you'll hear the word escape many times as we go through populations that are impacted. But it's an opportunity to play slots, card games, things online instead of going to a casino. Excuse me. Most people who gamble online also do participate in other forms of gambling. So what we learn from that is the more ways somebody gambles and the more options they have, the more likely they are to develop a problem. Sports betting. And we're going to cover this a little bit more. We do have a full training that we hopefully will be offering through this same avenue to everybody listening within the next month or two. I've completed the training. It's done. I've got it all ready. We just have to get it approved to facilitate it. Legal sports betting is increasing state by state across the country. New York State legalized mobile sports betting, as we know, because you probably haven't been able to escape the advertising and the constant bombardment of this excitement that you're missing out on if you're not a part of it. And that's part of the sell. Also, I don't know, you may have noticed, and if you haven't, you will now, they're not calling it betting in the commercials. There's actually a term that's been created for a lot of these apps. It's called wagertainment. So they're removing the gambling, the feel of gambling. They're normalizing this gambling by calling it wagertainment and putting so much money into advertising. And as we mentioned very briefly when we had football polls and brackets in our types of gambling discussion, even people who don't normally participate in sports betting will fill out a bracket, or they will buy football squares. And that's fine. And most people don't develop a problem, but it is one more time that people can be exposed. And as a lot of our clients will tell you, it was just that one time with that one win. And from there, it just got out of control. So mobile sports betting, some of the concerns that we have about mobile sports betting is just the increase in the availability. It's on your phone. It's 24/7. We go into this very much in detail of how this works in our mobile sports betting training. So we're going to touch on it fast, but it's very easy to create an account, fund your account, and lose your money. The advertising has just been criminal. It's just you can't escape how much money is going into the advertising for gambling. And in New York State, we talked to someone who does media sales, and these apps and these sports books are actually targeting college towns because they know if you get people in at a younger age, they'll stick around. College students are, the excitement and the thrill. 24/7 accessibility. It's on your phone. You can bet on a soccer game right now that's going on in another country if there's no US sports. New younger audience, like I mentioned, that's who they're targeting, but also that's who's interested because newer, younger audience are very mobile. They're very online connected through social media. This is the number of times people check their phone. I've seen anywhere from 40 to 100 times a day people check their phones. And I would imagine that younger people are checking it even more. And it's just one more app that they can check to take away some of that time. And then there's that lack of perceived spending. So when you fund your account online, no money is changing hands. And casinos learned that years ago when they stopped using cash and you had to use, the cards or whatever you're using. So all of these lead to the concern for us is even people who have never gambled before are being exposed to such a greater risk than walking into a casino for the first time with this mobile sports betting. So real quick checklist. Did you consider all of these things that we talked about, the esports, everything that we've mentioned, gambling? And if you didn't, did that change how many times you've gambled before? If you want to throw into the chat box, it'd be interesting just to know if it changed anybody's mind, whether or not you've gambled in the last year. We won't go through all of the yeses and nos, but if this has changed your mind after hearing all those different types, please let us know in the chat. And also in the chat, where is gambling taking place? And it's not a trick question. So we had a couple of yeses. Haven't gambled in the past year. Good. Definitely don't download those sports betting apps. Everywhere. Schools, absolutely. Casinos. Yeah, so as we can see, so we cover, casinos, office pools, at work. What we're kind of leaning towards is almost everywhere. It's kind of where we're looking at. Bars have a lot of gambling opportunities. Home sporting events, great. That's awesome. So again, now with different locations of where gambling is taking place, all this different stuff, does it give you a different idea of how much gambling is actually going on a daily basis and in places that you might not always think of? The statistics we have are old. And the reason they're old is because there's not a lot of research going on for gambling. There was a recent study by OASIS that we are taking pieces out of and starting to work into our presentations, and that'll help a lot. But there needs to be more research. There needs to be more attention. I think with the number of increase in calls that we've seen within our organization for help, we had a record month in February. And then this month is already a record over last month. So we've just seen a massive increase in the people that need help across the state. This may spur on some organizations to do a little more research. But approximately 85% of US adults have gambled at least once in their lives. And approximately 60% have gambled in the past year. Now, this last year, we think that number is going to be much, much higher because of mobile sports betting. But also, you can buy lottery tickets on your phone. So people who were not buying lottery tickets because of COVID and not going out, it was such a convenient time for that app to be released. And interestingly, too, that app where you could buy tickets on your phone was released the week that the Powerball went up to $1 billion. So it was just such a coincidence how all of this fell into line. And now everybody who used to go into the store, they don't have to go to the store anymore. And if you buy a couple tickets for the daily numbers and you don't win, you can buy the nightly numbers. You can buy the late drawings, and you can just keep buying them. Where you would have had to go into the store, buy your tickets. If you lose, you go back next time. And it's just that 24/7 accessibility that is really driving some of these problems. So we'll talk a little bit about a spectrum of gambling behaviors. On the far end,
I'm sorry, Jeffrey. There's a question in the chat.
okay.
Someone's curious about other countries' gambling stats.
As far as other countries go, I don't have any other countries' stats, but I can tell you that Australia, for one, has a lot more research. The United Kingdom has a lot more research. There's a lot of studies being done all the time. There's a lot more protections in place. So if you were looking for some of that information, you could start with Australia and the UK, and that'll give you an idea of a country that has recognized the problem and has also done that. We just had in the chat Singapore, and that makes a lot of sense too. So you could look at the countries that have a lot of gambling opportunities and what they're doing about it and how long they've been doing that, because then you can see how far ahead other countries have been when it came to gambling. But they were also farther ahead with legalizing different activities that might not have been legal here. So on the far left here, we have non-gambling. So this people who are not gambling in any way. Now we have at-risk gambling here. You might refer to it, or someone might refer to this as social or recreational gambling. And we call it at-risk gambling because anytime someone is participating in an activity that could be addictive, there's risk involved. Finally, we get to what we all came here for. Problem gambling. I'm going to define problem gambling in a minute when we start talking about some warning signs. But our definition of problem gambling is pretty straightforward. If your gambling is causing a problem in your life, it's problem gambling. And the reason that our organization looks at it this way is because we don't want to exclude anyone because they don't meet certain criteria. If someone reaches out for help and says, I spend $50 a week on scratch offs and it's just too much for me, but I can't stop. To us, that's the same as someone who's spending $500 a day and they're losing their home and their car and their marriage has dissolved. Because if you need help, we want to help and we want to be there. So one of our slogans is no barriers to help. And what you can see here is there's no clear line between these behaviors. And you can actually kind of traverse back and forth. If you start to gamble too much, you can kind of stop a little bit, slow down your gambling, move back down the line. But there's a clear line between problem gambling and gambling disorder. Gambling disorder is diagnosable in the DSM-5. And if you meet 3 of the, I believe it's 9 criteria for gambling disorder, you have a mild gambling disorder. And as you increase with the number of criteria that you meet, the severity of that gambling disorder goes up. So what we're going to do when we're going to talk about the warning signs of problem gambling a little bit, but the way we're going to do that, instead of just throwing a bunch of warning signs up at you, we're going to contrast problem and disorder gambling and social recreational gambling, because most people can gamble without developing a problem. Most people can gamble, as you see right on the top, for entertainment, for fun. And most people can do that. Problem or disordered gambling, it's not fun anymore. It's a need. It's a compulsion to gamble. You're experiencing negative consequences due to your gambling. Social recreational gambling, there's limits that you can set on time or money. I know, if we were in person and we were doing some group chat, there's a lot of people who say, when I go to the casino, I don't take my credit card. When I go to the casino, I don't take my bank card. I only take $50. And that's setting a limit on money. People will also say, I set a timer on my watch or my phone, and I'm going to spend an hour and then I'm going to leave. And they do that, and they don't have any problem leaving. However, the problem with disorder gambling, it's an increased amount of time that's being spent. They can't control the amount of time that they're spending on their gambling activities, which, as we look back on some of our mobile opportunities and online opportunities, this becomes even more scary for people who are walking that line. Using money that's needed for something else, or borrowing money to pay off your gambling debts. That's not setting limits if you're having to borrow money to either keep gambling or to pay off debts you already have. Realistic expectations. Social recreational gambling, you have a realistic expectation. I know most people walk into the casino and figure if I walk out with $10 more, I did great. But most people are kind of figuring they're going to lose. It's a hope to win, but kind of expecting the loss. Problem disorder gambling, it's irrational thinking. They're always expecting to win. They have a system to win. People have a system when they buy bingo boards, how to win. People know which slot machines are going to hit because they have a system. People will wear diapers on a casino floor at a slot machine so they don't have to get up, because if they get up, the machine's going to hit. And that's just irrational. So think about that next time you walk through a casino floor. That's the irrational thinking that people that are struggling with a problem or disordered gambling are experiencing. And finally, we're going to just touch on walking away from the losses. Realistically, I lost. I took $50. I had fun. It was entertaining. I set that money limit. I figured I was going to lose, and I just walk away. All of that makes sense to the social recreational gambler. Problem in disordered gambling, it wasn't fun. It wasn't entertainment. It was a compulsion. It was a need. Spent too much money, spent too much time expecting to win and trying to get even. And that's where it can start to get really deep financially, is trying to dig out of those financial holes. We've had clients with $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in debt that come to us because they're just at the end of the rope. They have no idea what to do. So we have just a quick trivia question for you. Nope, this one's not trivia yet. Sorry to get your hopes up. Hang on. So it's estimated that there's 2 million US adults that meet the criteria for a severe gambling problem within the last year. Another 4 to 6 million would be considered to have a mild or moderate gambling problem. They don't meet the full criteria yet, but they met one or maybe more depending on their gambling behaviors and the frequency. That number may not seem like a lot, but one person with a gambling problem affects 8 to 10, and we've actually upped this statistic to 8 to 12 additional people. And that could be a loved one. It could be work, it could be suffering, it could be their kids, it could just be people that they come in contact with within their family. This is a quick trivia question for you. If anyone can identify, I needed a picture with one person out of 10, and this was the first one that popped up. Does anyone know who these 10 people are? No. So the gentleman on the bottom left there, that's actually Bill Gates. These are the 10 founders of Microsoft, and they're all billionaires. So the first picture when I searched for 10 people happened to be this one, which of course made sense. I was on a Microsoft browser and I typed in 10 people. There's the picture of the 10 that founded it. But that's your first trivia question. We have one more coming up in a few minutes. So who's at risk? If you heard me talking a little bit earlier as we were getting ready to get started, there's no face to gambling. There's no face to problem gambling. There's no face to gambling disorder. But there are some groups of people that are at risk a little bit more, and there's reasons for that, and we're going to touch on just a few of those groups. But we are going to start with male and female. And for our purposes, we are sticking, the only research we had is biological male, biological female. So we do have someone within our organizations that is working on an LGBTQ plus presentation about gambling. It's just taking a lot of time to get the statistics that we need to be able to build a training for that. But for our purposes, biological females tend to start gambling later on in life. The reasons for that could be escaping stress or trauma. It could be empty nests. The kids are off to, out away to school or moved out of the house. And it's really a distraction. But females tend to develop a gambling addiction very quickly. So they start later, but develop that addiction quicker. That statistic might also change with the mobile sports betting and the online gaming taking off, because some of these are coming from is casino gambling. So we'll have to see, and we'll update everybody with some of those statistics. So biological males start gambling earlier in life. They gamble for entertainment, competition, excitement, peer pressure, wanting to be part of it. But they can develop a gambling addiction later in life over a longer period of time. Gambling earlier, but it takes longer to get to that point where it's a problem or an addiction for biological men. Senior citizens and retirees are at higher risk. And when we're talking about the higher risk, it's a couple of percentage, 2%, 4%. But if 2% of the population are at risk and seniors are at a 4% increased risk, it is a substantial number. And why is that? Senior citizens, retirees, it's escape. There's loss, there's grief. As you get older, you tend to lose family members. It's also socialization. To go to a casino, there's bus trips that take the seniors to the casinos, and access to disposable income can also lead to spending your money on something that is a social activity and helps you escape. And that puts senior citizens at a higher risk. Veterans and active military, unfortunately, veterans and active military are at a higher risk for a lot of things. There is a lot of research. I do want to mention, if anyone listening is part of an organization that works with veterans, active military, or first responders, we have a statewide veteran coordinator who is working on a statewide level with each region to help improve the problem gambling services for veterans in those communities. And we also work with him on a local level. So if you want to get in touch about working with veterans and addressing problem gambling, feel free to text me, call me, shoot me an email. And you see escape again. So senior citizens, there was this escape. Veterans and active military, it's an escape. There's a lot of PTSD. There's a lot of depression, anxiety, but also thrill, risk. Active military, especially, that we've spoken to that have been deployed or been in war zones, there is such a risk involved, and there's that adrenaline, there's that rush that just can't be duplicated or replaced, and it's missing in their lives. The transition to civilian life can be very difficult for a lot of active military and veterans. The accessibility on base, not in the US, but overseas, there are 3,141 slot machines overseas on the overseas bases, which have generated about $100 million a year in revenue. And that revenue goes towards activities and social activities and recreational activities for the military. But the money is going back in to be used within the military community, but there's no screening in the military for gambling. According to our John Crandall is our veteran coordinator across the state. And he always says that if they do ask about gambling, they say, "You're not gambling, right?" As they shake their head that you better answer no. And that's not screening. Kids, young people, brain just hasn't been developed yet. They're more apt to take risks. Susceptibility to peer pressure. There's also now, especially with gaming becoming so big, there's this desire for that low effort, high excitement type of activity. And just being more susceptible to new stimuli. College students, excuse me, transitioning to college life can be really hard. Psychological difficulties while they're at school could be the first time that someone is away from home. Fitting in is very difficult. As a lot of us know, the unmanageable debt can lead people to that quick fix. You only need to win once to pay off your debt, right? Failing grades, and that leads to that escape again. Amy, I saw something in the chat. Did you?
Yes. What if someone gambles regularly, like lotto tickets, has the compulsion to gamble, but is not putting themselves at too much risk?
It's a difficult question because people from the outside seeing that understand the risk and see that risk. If the person isn't ready to recognize that it's a problem, it's very difficult for them to seek treatment or to even recognize that there's a problem. So unfortunately, sometimes it does take a little bit of financial strain or difficulties within the family. But it is, if it's affecting the family because somebody sees it, it's a conversation that can be had simply by making sure everything is okay. And we do hear that a lot. We have a lot of clients who call us. They're just not ready for help, but they know they gamble a lot. They know they're gambling too much, or they see all, the advertisements right now that say, do you have a gambling problem? And it's getting a lot of people to wonder if what they're doing is a problem because they're constantly distracted by gambling. They're gambling a lot. Maybe they miss family events to go to the casino. So they start to wonder, do I have a problem? And so it's a very difficult question. If it's a family member and it is something that's impacting the family, that's where that kind of conversation of making sure everything's okay. It's the same with anything where you don't want to have an intervention or confront somebody because there is that stigma to gambling and people might take it that way. But it is a conversation that you might want to have to make sure that everything's okay. So problem gambling, addiction, mental health. I see something in the chat. I'm just going to
Yes.
pause.
So the question is, could the argument be made that one habituates with perceived lower risk gambling towards higher risk gambling, in essence, like gateway drugs purportedly do?
Yes, absolutely. And it could be something as simple as if we have time at the end, we have a few slides about workplace. If we run out of time, we usually don't do those. But one of the things we like to mention is, especially right now with March Madness, you could hand somebody a bracket to fill out. That person could be in recovery. That person could be in recovery from alcohol or substance use, and they get this one activity. They fill out their bracket, and as they're watching it, and they're watching to see who wins, it's that anticipation that is releasing that dopamine. Many people think it's the win. People are addicted to winning. It's the anticipation of the win. It's the anticipation of that, what the chance becomes. So somebody sitting down with a bracket for the first time and getting that rush of adrenaline might then seek out something else to place a bet on. So it absolutely, those less risky activities, I guess, if you want to call them that, or low risk, can definitely lead to an increase in the amount of time and money and activities that someone spends on gambling to get that same rush as drugs or alcohol. And speaking of drugs and alcohol, perfect time for that question. There is a co-occurrence with substance use and gambling. 73% of problem gamblers also have an alcohol use disorder. 38% also have a drug use disorder, and 60% also have a nicotine dependence. And when these statistics were recorded, they make so much sense because a lot of the statistics come from casino gambling. And what can you do in casinos? Now, some of this has changed with the amount you can smoke, but alcohol, nicotine, there's nobody making sure that you're not on drugs. You can do all of those things. Now, with what happened with COVID and everyone being at home, you can do these activities on your phone and gamble. You can also do all of these at home. So the connection is going to probably be even stronger next time we have updated statistics. So mental health disorders and problem gambling exist for many reasons. Sometimes there's just pressure related to gambling can cause depression, anxiety. There's other times when things like PTSD can lead to gambling as an escape or trauma, as we discussed a little with veterans. The majority of those experiencing disordered gambling have a lifetime history of a psychiatric disorder. So what we mean by this, almost 50% of those with a gambling disorder have a mood disorder. Over 60% of those with a gambling disorder have a personality disorder. Now, the biggest thing to take from this, 95% of those with gambling disorder have been treated for their other mental health problems and never the gambling. So if we look at it the other way, only 5% of lifetime problem gamblers have seen a counselor, have been sitting in front of someone to discuss what's happening, but their gambling has never been addressed. 5% have been treated for the gambling. our organization is working on changing that. So COVID-19, I've mentioned a few times. Unfortunately, we still have to talk about it because it has impacted a lot. It's impacted a lot with mental health. This is an Ontario study because there wasn't one done in the US, but it's close enough to the US. Online gambling was associated with higher risk, more money being wagered, and it was a younger audience being impacted. And this makes sense with what we talked about with the online and the mobile betting, where younger people are getting involved, they're at home, COVID is keeping people home, they're bored. These are the years you should be hanging out with your friends and going places. But instead, people turn to online gambling. Some of the significant protective factors included negative impact of COVID on household income. It's a way to make some money. It's a way to make that money back. High levels of anxiety and depression. Gambling under the influence of alcohol or drugs, which people are doing at home more now. And in New York State, with things being legalized and laws changing, these numbers are all going to increase. Being motivated to gamble because it helps when they're nervous or depressed, so that escape again. Wanting to win back money that they've lost to gambling, so chasing the losses, that they gambled too much money because of the stress and the depression and loss of income, and they're stuck at home with 24-hour accessibility. It just keeps going in a cycle. And just wanting to earn extra income. You know, bet $5, buy a $5 lottery ticket, you make 20, what if I win 20? And seems like a quick fix. Excuse me.
So there was another point raised in the chat.
Okay.
I have read that people are addicted to the loss as much as the win. Many times when a gambler loses, they increase their wages. They increase their wages and the adrenaline rush increases, thus the chase is just as much as the win.
Yeah, definitely. There's many different reasons why someone goes down that road. And all of it, like you mentioned in the chat, it's leading back to that rush, that adrenaline, that dopamine, and what's happening to the individual's brains. So if the rush is coming from that amount of money and it becomes the compulsion is because they're spending more and more, and that's so exciting, it's going to release those same types of chemicals in the brain. Unfortunately, suicide risk among individuals with a gambling problem is the highest of any addiction. So 1 in 5 people with gambling problem has attempted or died by suicide. Thankfully, we're becoming more open about discussing suicide during our conversations about mental health and mental wellness, but understanding the connection between problem gambling and suicide prevention efforts on a national level will help a lot in getting to the bottom of helping people before it gets to this point. Second trivia question. This is the last one, and we get a little participation. So, what city has the highest rate of suicide in the country? So if you can throw a couple of answers in the chat.
Las Vegas. Vegas.
You guys are too good. It is absolutely Las Vegas. So Las Vegas has 3 times the national average. Las Vegas is the gambling capital of the world. Problem gamblers have the highest rate of suicide. It's not a coincidence that Las Vegas has the highest rate of suicide. Las Vegas also has the highest rate of domestic violence in the country. We have a domestic violence and suicide training, or domestic violence and problem gambling training, if anyone's interested in learning more about that connection. But domestic violence is associated with gambling quite often. I'm just going to check the time real quick. Workplace safety. We're going to go through workplace safety a little bit quick, and then we're going to talk about what we do as an organization, how people get help. So we save a few minutes for wrap up and some questions. Do people gamble at work? As we've discussed along the way, a lot of people suggested work, office pools, stuff like that. Yes, absolutely, people are gambling at work. And I could be gambling right now while I'm talking to you on my phone because the accessibility is just always there. Someone sitting at their computer, someone checking their messages. You never know what someone is doing at work when they're looking at a screen. Raffles, office pools, sporting event brackets, etc. All of these things are gambling activities people can do. And although they're social and generally innocent, just remember there could be people that are susceptible to gambling problems or already having a problem or in recovery. So just being very careful at your office place of doing these types of activities. Sometimes we suggest around certain times of year, if not all year, there's an area in the break room, or somebody can put a sign up on their cubicle that says gambling free safe zone, something like that. So they're not approached, because even just approaching someone can send them down that path. And we just want to be really careful to protect everybody in every situation. So gambling in the workplace. I'm just going to move my... So gambling in the workplace can lead to crime. We see a lot of, usually if something makes the news and someone has extorted or committed fraud of hundreds of thousands of dollars, at some point something is in there about gambling or trips to Vegas. There's loss of productivity, which costs the organization a lot of money as well. Could be a trigger for other people, as we mentioned, if they see these activities. And there's just that cultural shift right now where gambling is okay. And that's making it even more risky for these different activities. Gambling is okay in the media. It's becoming less stigmatized to participate in gambling activities. And with crime, I like to mention with certain groups, think about what $200,000-$300,000 in embezzlement could do to a nonprofit organization. That could shut down an organization completely and put a lot of people out of work, but also all the people that they're helping. So it's very important in certain, to protect your workplace. What can we do? You can create a policy statement. As I was just talking about with the nonprofit, monitoring your money stream is very important. There's usually a director of finance or a finance person, finance managers, but having a clear understanding of those money streams is very important for the organization to be able to catch things if anything is going wrong. Making financial counseling available, problem gambling and mental health screening, and just awareness training like what we're doing right now is a great way to help everybody in the workplace. So who are we? What do we do? How do people get help? So we are a nonprofit organization. We are the Western Problem Gambling Resource Center. We have two goals: raise awareness of problem gambling throughout our region, connect individuals and families that are adversely affected by gambling to the help that they need. Just by joining us, you've helped us spread that message a little bit. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of other training. So just reach out if you're interested in learning more. And we can even create a training for the populations that you work with if you want us to. We personally recruit our own network of private practice clinicians who receive specialized training and are trained to work with their therapy around the gambling. One of the best things about our organization and what we do is, as you can imagine, financial problems tend to be one of the first things people are experiencing. So if somebody has a copay, if somebody doesn't have insurance, or there are often times when someone doesn't want to go through their insurance because they don't want a spouse to find out, or a loved one, or family members, or maybe their workplace might find out. So they don't want to go through that route. So we cover the cost of the counseling for the individual, but we'll also cover the cost of the counseling for their family members that want to attend counseling as well. And it's not like an EAP program where you may have 1, 2, or 3 visits and then you move on. Once you're with one of our private practice clinicians, it's up to them. It's up to the client and the clinician to decide how long the treatment needs to be and how often they need to meet. And we will continue to cover that cost of their counseling until they're in the place where they feel comfortable with their recovery. The raising awareness part, we do trainings, we do presentations. We do, every year we do key informant interviews, which we will put all that information together. Basically what we're doing is interviewing anyone in the community that wants to talk about gambling. We put all that information in with other information to try to build our needs assessment for the community. And we form our work plan around that needs assessment. So if you're interested in participating, they're like, 15, 20 minutes, and we talk about your organization, our organization, and what we see in the community to figure out what resources we need. Information dissemination is just getting the word out. If you tell one person today that you attended a training on problem gambling, and hopefully, it was a good training for you, that's just helping raise awareness and share all of that. We also do post a lot of information on Facebook. It's Western PGRC. You can search for that and follow us on there. It would be great if you followed along with what we're doing. So I do see I see a couple things in the chat. We'll get to that in a second. I think someone answered someone else's question. So if you did, I really appreciate you stepping in and offering some information. So we're here to help anybody impacted. So if you have a client that you're working with, if they just want to talk to someone, or if they're not sure about their insurance, or if they're not sure if they want to just do a GA meeting, which is Gamblers Anonymous, or Gam-Anon for family members, maybe Smart Recovery, all of these things, if it's related to gambling, call us and we will help. We can take it off your hands and help get the person the help that they need. March is Problem Gambling Awareness Month. So a lot of things we're doing is raising awareness of problem gambling. So we have a lot of stuff out on Facebook. If you go back and look at some of the things we've done, we have some of our conference information on there. Senator Robert Ort has been great. He issued a proclamation for us for March to be Problem Gambling Awareness Month. And on Thursday, he's introducing it on the Senate floor. And he's going to send us a video of that so we can post it on our social media of the senator on the Senate floor introducing the resolution for March to be Problem Gambling Awareness Month. So we thank we thank Senator Ort for that. So my information is on the screen. We have about 3 minutes. I'm being conscious of everyone's time.
So in the chat,
Okay.
Someone asked about good assessment tools, and the response was a link to some good assessment tools.
Okay.
Kathleen
Awesome.
did post the evaluation link in the chat. This is a question, curious why the spectrum of gambling behavior starts with non-gambling and goes right to at-risk gambling. Shouldn't social recreation gambling be on that continuum?
Yes, and when we refer to, as I mentioned during the slide, we refer to social and recreational gambling as at-risk gambling because anyone participating in a gambling activity or any activity that could be addictive is putting themselves at risk for the addiction. So it'd be the same as like a social drinker, recreational drinker. It's the same with the gambling. So just that one activity or a couple times a month, it is putting yourself at risk. So social recreational gambling and at risk are interchangeable for us. We stick with the at risk because we're leading it down the line towards problem gambling.
Thank you.
I hope that was clear.
Are there any other questions? There's no more in the chat. There is a compliment for you. Thank you. This was great.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I really appreciate all the participation. I know it's hard virtually to participate, but it's great. It makes it so much more fun and interactive. If you have any questions or you need anything at all, feel free to call, email. I will get my contact information up again. I hit the wrong button.
And thank
Somehow
you
I
so
had
much.
that back at the beginning, but it'll be up in a second.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. That was great. And thanks to Amy for monitoring the chat. Thanks you to everybody for participating in our session. I did paste the link to the evaluation in the chat box, so if you could just go in and take a moment to complete that for us, that'd be greatly appreciated. Our presentation, today's presentation, will be posted on our webpage, erie.gov/mental health, within the next couple days. I also posted our link for our April session, which is harm reduction, philosophy, and practice. And then just mark your calendars for future sessions. They're the fourth Tuesday of the month from noon until 1. We'll be sending out notices for future sessions, and you can also check our website for any announcements and past presentations. Again, if you're interested in being a presenter, please let Amy know. If you have ideas for topics that you'd like to learn more about, let her know that as well. You can write that in your evaluation, or you can email her at amy.rockwood@erie.gov.
Everybody, there was a real quick question about the survey for the CEUs. Everyone who's registered and completed the training will receive the link to our survey through our organization, and you'll receive that within the next couple of days. And when you fill that out, if you do need the CEOs, have your license number ready and make sure you put exactly how you want your name spelled and the email address you would like it to go to. And that's all right within the survey. It's a pretty quick survey. And it'll ask you for like today's date too. And we'll get that out to you. We usually wait about a week for the surveys to come back in, and we start putting out the certificates. So if you can't fill it out in the next, few days, don't worry about it, because as we get them through time, we keep processing them. But knowing that that's around the date when most of them will come in, we can get a lot of them out at the same time.
Okay, and that will come from a NewYorkProblemGambling.org email? Is that?
Yes, it will come. It will come from me. So it'll come from Wierzbicki@nyproblemgambling.org. So in the next couple of days, we do go to spam and junk folders quite often because we have gambling like just everywhere within our emails. So if you want to add me to your safe list ahead of time, you can do that. If you don't get the survey link, as soon as I get the registration list, I'm going to send it out. So if you don't get it by the end of this week, reach out and we'll make sure you got it, because your firewalls within your organization might block us out.
Great. Thank you again, Jeffrey. It was a great presentation, and thanks to everybody for being part of our collaborative. See everybody next month.